There is a silent saboteur living within you, whispering lies in the voice of confidence, disguising fear as strength. It is not your enemy, but it is not your friend. It calls itself I, but it is only your ego. And if you let it drive your life, it will take everything sacred and real and twist it into a theater of illusions. The ego promises control. It tells you that if you hold tighter, speak louder, seem more certain, you will conquer the chaos. But this is the oldest lie of the human soul. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. When you worship control, you forsake wisdom. You resist the seasons of life, the pain that teaches, the grief that deepens, the silence that speaks. And so you remain stuck, caged within your own insistence that you know best. Even as everything around you crumbles, the ego abhors vulnerability. It fears being seen, truly seen. So it builds walls, crafts masks, and screams, "I am fine," while the soul cries behind it. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is the gateway to intimacy, to courage, to the alchemy of transformation. Without it, your relationships are hollow and your growth is stunted. You stay safe, and you stay small. Look around you. How much of what you do is for applause, for likes, for admiration, for the approval of those who will forget your name tomorrow? The ego thrives on validation. It feeds off praise, yet dies with criticism. It cannot rest in the quiet, for the quiet reminds it of its hollowness. And so you chase and chase and chase, but you never arrive, because validation from others will never satisfy a soul starving for authenticity. The ego traps you in a single story. This is who I am, it says, and you believe it. But that identity is not the fullness of you. It is a snapshot, a role, a costume. And as long as you cling to it, you refuse to grow. You refuse to evolve. The tree must break through its own bark to reach the sky. So must you. And finally, what of the parts you reject? The anger, the jealousy, the fear, the rage. The ego says, these are not me, but they are. They are your shadow, and what you do not integrate, you will project. What you deny within, you will battle without. Until you have the courage to meet the monsters within, you will keep creating them in your relationships, in your work, in your world. You were not born to be perfect. You were born to be whole. And wholeness is messy, mysterious, radiant, real. When you stop serving your ego and start listening to your soul, you will not lose yourself. You will finally find yourself. So I ask you, not as a teacher, but as a fellow traveler, lay down the mask, step into the dark, let go of the illusion. Your life is not waiting for the approval of others. It is waiting for you to remember who you truly are. There is a deep and haunting delusion that grips the modern soul, a lie whispered by the ego, passed down like a silent curse from generation to generation. It is the illusion of control. The ego craves it, builds its entire architecture around it, and tells you that if you can just hold the reins tightly enough, life will obey your command. You will never suffer again. You will never fail. You will never be exposed to the chaotic unknown, but this is not truth. It is a prison made of mirrors, shiny, convincing, and ultimately hollow. From the moment we are born, the ego begins to shape itself. It learns to adapt, to defend, to plan, to perform. And at first, this is necessary. The ego is not evil. It is a tool. It protects us from psychological harm in childhood. It gives us structure when the world is too vast to understand. It allows us to function. But the problem is this: the ego forgets it is a tool and begins to believe it is the master. And when the ego rules the house, it becomes tyrannical. Control, as promised by the ego, is a seductive lie. It whispers if you plan enough, you can avoid pain. If you are good enough, smart enough, perfect enough, you can bend reality to your will. If you control people, control outcomes, control your image, you will be safe, and so you try. You tighten your schedule, your expectations, your rules. You live in anticipation of disaster. You micromanage your relationships. You rehearse conversations in your head that will never happen. You monitor your body, your career, your reputation. You hold so tightly that you stop breathing, but control is not mastery. It is fear in disguise. True mastery comes from surrender, not to laziness, not to helplessness, but to the flow of life itself. You were never meant to dictate the river. You were meant to learn how to swim in it. When the ego tries to dam the current, to reroute the natural rhythm of your existence, suffering follows, and this suffering is not random. It is the soul's rebellion against the artificial. It is the deeper self crying out, "There is more than this." Consider how much of your anxiety stems from trying to control what you were never meant to control. The thoughts of others, the future of your career, the behavior of your partner, the outcome of a dream. You mistake planning for power, but the truth is, life will disrupt your plans without apology. It is not cruel. It is alive. It is intelligent. It is evolving you. Every disruption, every failure, every twist of fate is not an attack on your ego. It is an invitation to grow beyond it. When you let go of control, you do not become weak. You become aligned. Aligned with what? With reality, with truth, with the natural cycles of becoming and unbecoming. You learn to trust that you are not the creator of life. You are a participant in it. You begin to act not from force, but from flow. You stop resisting change and begin dancing with it. You stop commanding life and begin listening to it. Let us look deeper. Control is rooted in fear, and fear is born of separation. The ego sees itself as separate from life, from others, from the divine. It believes it must protect itself from the world, and in that belief it isolates you. You become a soldier, not a lover. You become a competitor, not a collaborator, but the soul knows better. The soul knows you are connected to everything, that the same breath that fills your lungs flows through the trees, that the same intelligence guiding the stars pulses in your heart. And when you truly feel this, control becomes unnecessary. Now imagine a life where you are no longer shackled by the need to control everything. What does that look like? You wake up and feel peace, not because you have everything figured out, but because you trust yourself to navigate whatever comes. You enter relationships with open hands, not clenched fists. You speak your truth without fear of rejection, because your worth is not up for negotiation. You create, not for applause, but because your soul must sing. You rest, you breathe, you live. But there is one great obstacle. The ego will fight to survive. It will tell you that letting go is weakness. That surrender is defeat. It will shame you, guilt you, frighten you into submission. It will remind you of every time you lost something, every time chaos came, every moment you felt powerless, and it will say, "See, this is why you must never let go again." But you must. You must, not because surrender is easy, but because it is the only way to become whole. Letting go is not giving up. It is growing up. It is the sacred act of choosing reality over illusion. It is the courage to say, "I do not need to control everything to be at peace. I trust the deeper wisdom guiding my path." And yes, that wisdom will sometimes lead you into the storm. But even in the storm, you will find something that control could never give you, the power of presence, the strength of resilience, the grace of transformation. You will discover that life does not break you to punish you. It breaks you open. The old self, the ego self, must crack so the light can enter. So let it crack. Let the illusion of control shatter. In its place, build a deeper kind of strength, one rooted in truth, in spirit, in surrender. Do not mistake this for passivity. The surrendered soul is not passive. It is powerful beyond measure. It moves with clarity. It acts with purpose. It speaks with authority, not because it seeks control, but because it is aligned with something greater than control, wisdom. In the end, your ego will not be destroyed. It will be integrated. You will not become less. You will become more open, more whole, more alive. But this begins with one sacred act, letting go of the illusion of control. So I ask you, what are you holding on to that no longer serves you? What are you gripping so tightly that your knuckles have turned white? Is it a narrative, a fear, a persona, a dream that no longer fits who you're becoming? Breathe, now loosen your grip and take the first step, not in controlling your life, but in truly living it. There is a quiet terror that stalks the human heart. It wears no name, carries no sword, and yet it conquers lives every single day. It is the fear of being seen, not for your image, your resume, or your carefully curated persona, but for your true, unfiltered, naked self. It is the fear of vulnerability, and this fear, fueled and inflamed by the ego, is silently ruining your life. The ego is terrified of exposure. It builds its identity like armor, layer upon layer of achievement, performance, charm, and bravado. But no matter how dazzling the armor, the truth remains. It is a costume, not a cure. And behind that costume is a soul screaming for authenticity, aching to breathe without pretending, to cry without apologizing, to speak without rehearsing. From the moment we are old enough to sense rejection, we begin hiding. We learn that certain feelings are acceptable, others are shameful. We discover that strength is admired, but sadness is pitied. That control is respected, but confusion is ridiculed, and so the ego adapts, it hardens, it silences the parts of you that it deems dangerous, your longing, your fears, your wounds. Vulnerability, it insists, is weakness. But here lies the grand mistake. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is truth, and only the truth will set you free. The ego fears vulnerability because it cannot control the outcome of honesty. It cannot predict how people will respond when you speak from the heart instead of the script. It cannot guarantee applause when you drop the mask, and so it panics. It tells you to stay quiet, to stay strong, to stay safe. But in obeying the ego, you lose connection. Not just with others, but with your own soul. You see, vulnerability is the birthplace of every beautiful human experience. It is the soil from which intimacy grows, the foundation of courage, the entry point of healing. Without it, your relationships become performances. Your passions become chores. Your life becomes a tightly wound play that you didn't write and no longer want to star in. How many people suffer in silence because the ego won't let them say, "I'm not okay"? How many marriages crumble not because love died, but because two people were too afraid to say, "I feel hurt," "I feel scared," or "I need you"? How many dreams have been buried alive because someone feared looking foolish? How many friendships remain shallow because neither side dares to go deeper? The ego thrives on appearance. It asks, "How do I seem?" not "How do I feel?" It is obsessed with image, with optics, with the illusion of perfection. But perfection is a myth. It's a cage. It kills the human spirit one performance at a time. Real life is messy. It is raw. It is unfiltered. It requires you to show up not as an idea of yourself, but as the whole, vulnerable, evolving being that you are. What the ego doesn't want you to know is this: vulnerability is the most magnetic force on earth. Why? Because it is real. In a world drowning in filters, pretense, and polished personas, authenticity is electric. When someone dares to speak from their heart, they awaken something ancient and sacred in everyone who hears them. They give permission, they open doors, they remind us that we are not alone, and this is what the ego fears most, that when you stop hiding, others will stop hiding too. And suddenly, the whole house of cards comes down. Suddenly, people are crying in boardrooms. Artists are painting from their pain. Lovers are telling the truth. Strangers are holding hands, and the illusion of control, the ego's last defense, shatters under the weight of honesty. But let us not romanticize vulnerability. It is not easy. It requires courage, the kind of courage that shakes your knees and breaks your voice. It means telling the truth when lying would be easier. It means showing up when disappearing would be safer. It means admitting that you are afraid, confused, or hurt, and standing in that truth even when the world offers no applause. Vulnerability will cost you comfort. It will challenge your pride. But in exchange, it will give you everything that makes life worth living: intimacy, depth, growth, transformation, and joy. You cannot be fully loved if you are not fully seen, and you cannot be fully seen if you refuse to be vulnerable. Let us turn inward now. Ask yourself, what am I afraid to share? What truth in me has been silenced by fear? Is it the fear of being judged, the fear of not being enough, the fear of being too much? Whatever it is, name it. Look it in the eyes. Do not run from it. The only way to dissolve fear is to face it. You will discover something astonishing when you do. You will discover that the fear was a phantom, that your truth, when spoken, does not bring destruction. It brings liberation. That your tears do not repel people. They invite them. That your brokenness is not a barrier. It is a bridge. There is a profound psychological truth here. When you reject parts of yourself, you force others to do the same. But when you embrace your full humanity, your light and your shadow, you become a mirror in which others see their own wholeness. Vulnerability is contagious. It is divine rebellion against the tyranny of the mask. The world does not need more perfection. It needs more presence. It needs people who are willing to say, "This is who I am: messy, human, healing, evolving. And I am still worthy of love." That is the power that topples empires of ego. That is the revolution we are all aching for, and yes, you will get hurt. Vulnerability carries risk, but so does every beautiful thing. Love is risky, art is risky, truth is risky, but the greater risk is this: to live your entire life behind a mask and die, never having been truly seen. So what do you choose? The safety of illusion or the freedom of truth? The applause of the crowd or the intimacy of the soul? The control of the ego or the courage of the heart? Choose the heart always. Because when you strip away the pretense, when you drop the armor, when you dare to speak and be seen, you will discover something holy. You will discover that the soul you've been hiding is not unworthy. It is sacred, it is radiant, it is enough. And perhaps, just perhaps, when others see you shining from that place of raw, unfiltered truth, they too will remember who they are. And in that moment, your vulnerability will not only save you, it will save the world. There is a silent assassin within us. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It doesn't crash in like a storm. It builds slowly, subtly, day by day. You don't even notice it at first, but over time it wraps your mind in chains and suffocates your soul's cry for expansion. This force is the ego, and one of its deadliest effects is its ability to block your growth. Let us not misunderstand the ego. It is not evil. It is not your enemy. In fact, it was created to serve a purpose, to protect you, to help you navigate a world full of pain and unpredictability. But like a shadow that forgets it is not the light, the ego has taken the throne of your mind and convinced you that it is the entirety of who you are, but it is not. And until you see the ego for what it truly is, a frightened, controlling fragment of your identity, you will remain stuck. Because the ego does not want growth. The ego wants certainty, and growth is the antithesis of certainty. Growth requires surrender. Growth demands humility. Growth whispers, "There is more." And the ego screams, "But I already know." Here is the paradox: the more you think you know, the less you grow. The ego thrives in the illusion of mastery. It wants to be the smartest in the room, the most capable, the most in control. It wants to wear the badge of success. even if you are dying inside. And yet, real transformation does not come through control. It comes through chaos, through breakdowns, through moments of deep, unbearable discomfort where the old self cracks open and something raw and beautiful is born. The ego, however, cannot allow this. It will convince you that your worth is tied to your image, that if you admit you don't know, you are weak, that if you ask for help, you are failing, that if you fall, you are finished. But let me say this clearly, falling is not failing, it is becoming, and here is where most people stop, at the edge of discomfort, at the border between the known and the unknown. Because crossing that border means letting go of everything you've clung to for safety. Titles, habits, beliefs, even relationships. It means daring to say, what if I've been wrong? What if there's more? What if I'm not who I thought I was? The ego cannot survive those questions. But the soul is born in them. Every major growth moment in your life will begin with ego death, the death of certainty, the death of the image, the death of the familiar, and yes, it will feel like dying. Because the person you've been must dissolve so the person you can be can emerge. But the ego will fight. It will distract you with pride. It will seduce you with comfort. It will point fingers at everyone else saying, they're the problem, not me. It will do anything to avoid introspection, to avoid change, because it fears annihilation, but the soul does not fear death. It welcomes transformation, and herein lies the battleground between the ego's fear of death and the soul's hunger for rebirth. Let us speak plainly. If you are not growing, you are dying, not in the physical sense, but spiritually, emotionally, creatively. Your life begins to shrink, your dreams become distant, your relationships grow stale. You smile on the outside, but inside there is no fire. Why? Because you have allowed the ego to become your master. Growth requires the opposite of ego. It requires openness, curiosity, the willingness to be the student again. To be wrong, to not know, to try and fail and try again. But how often do we resist this? How often do we choose the illusion of perfection over the process of evolution? Think about the last time you were given feedback. Did you lean in with humility, or did your ego recoil? When life offered you a new path, did you embrace it or retreat into the familiar? When someone challenged your beliefs, did you listen or defend? You see, the ego doesn't want to grow, it wants to win. But growth is not about winning, it's about becoming. It is a shedding, a releasing, a breaking open. It is the courage to say, I don't have all the answers, but I am willing to learn. It is the strength to look your patterns in the eye and say, this is no longer who I choose to be. It is the grace to forgive yourself for who you were, and the faith to step into who you might be. True growth is not glamorous, it is messy, it is painful, it is lonely at times, but it is real, it is sacred. And it is the only path to fulfillment. You can spend your whole life feeding the ego and still feel empty, or you can starve the ego and finally feel free. The choice is always yours. The irony is that the very things we long for, love, connection, purpose, peace, exist on the other side of ego. When you stop needing to prove your worth, you finally become worthy. When you stop needing to be right, you finally learn. When you stop clinging to who you were, you make space for who you are becoming. So I ask you now, where in your life is the ego blocking your growth? Is it in your career, where fear of failure keeps you from taking the leap? Is it in your relationship, where pride is preventing true intimacy? Is it in your mind, where rigid beliefs are keeping you small? Where are you holding on when life is asking you to let go? Growth is not something that happens to you. It is something you choose, again and again and again. Every time you say yes to change, you reclaim your power. Every time you surrender the ego, you awaken the soul. And I promise you this, who you are becoming is far more beautiful than who your ego is trying to protect. Let yourself grow, even if it breaks you, even if it scares you, even if it requires letting go of everything you thought you were. because on the other side of ego is not just growth, it is rebirth. It is expansion, it is liberation, and it is the life you were born to live. There is no battlefield more sacred, more raw, and more revealing than the space between two human hearts. It is there, in the vulnerable, trembling intimacy of real connection, that we are either healed or harmed, and it is here that the ego often does its most devastating work. When we speak of relationships, whether romantic, familial, platonic, or professional, we often envision them as emotional havens, spaces of belonging, mirrors of our worth. But what we fail to see, what we refuse to confront, is how the very thing we trust to guide us, our ego, and be the saboteur of that sacred bond. Understand this: the ego does not seek connection, it seeks control. It does not desire intimacy, it desires domination. It wants to win, to be right, to protect its fragile identity at all costs. And in doing so, it will often sacrifice the very relationship it claims to cherish. You see, the ego thrives in separation, in the illusion of otherness. It whispers, "They don't understand you, you're better, you're more important, you were wronged." And the moment you believe it, a wall is built. One brick at a time, a word unspoken here, a judgment unhealed there, until what once felt like closeness becomes a chasm. Relationships begin to decay not from explosive arguments, but from silent resentments. From the little ways we let ego interrupt love, from the refusal to apologize, from the inability to listen, from the constant need to be the one who's right. The ego is obsessed with being right, but love is not. Love does not seek to win, it seeks to understand. Love does not punish, it heals. Love does not isolate, it opens. But none of these things are possible when the ego is in the driver's seat. Look at your life. Think of the people you've loved, the people you've lost. How many relationships have been wounded not by betrayal or abuse, but by pride? How many connections have faded because one or both of you were too caught up in ego to say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong," or simply, "Help me understand"? You see, the ego equates apology with weakness, vulnerability with danger, empathy with surrender, and yet these are the very nutrients of connection. Without them, relationships suffocate. But why does the ego fear these things so much? Because relationships expose us. They show us our blind spots. They reflect the parts of us we've hidden, denied, or suppressed. They shine a light on our insecurities, and the ego, terrified of being seen, lashes out. It blames, it withdraws, it deflects. It does anything but look in the mirror. And this is the tragedy. The very people who could help us grow become our enemies in the eyes of the ego. Not because they've harmed us, but because they've revealed us. Because they've dared to touch a wound we haven't healed. It takes great courage to be seen, to be fully known, to drop the masks and say, "This is who I am, broken, beautiful, learning." The ego cannot do this, but the soul craves it. Every healthy relationship demands the death of ego, not the annihilation of identity, but the release of illusion. The humility to say, "This relationship is not about me getting what I want. It's about becoming who I'm meant to be." Because relationships are not here to serve the ego. They are here to stretch us, teach us, awaken us. Every person you love will be both your mirror and your teacher. And if you let the ego speak too loudly, you will silence the very lessons that could transform your life. Have you ever noticed how the ego reacts when you're triggered? When your partner says something that stings, the ego doesn't say, "Why does this hurt? What old story is this activating?" No, it says, "They're attacking you, strike back." And so you enter the spiral. Two egos in a war, both defending wounded children, neither willing to lay down the sword. The result, disconnection. But what if in that moment you paused? What if you felt the sting but chose not to react? What if you said, "This pain is not new, it's old, it's mine, and this person has only awakened it, not caused it"? Now you are no longer reacting from ego, but responding from awareness, and now growth becomes possible. Healing becomes possible, love becomes possible. Let me say this, every conflict is an invitation to dissolve the ego. Every disagreement, every frustration, every emotional rupture is not a problem. It is an opportunity to look inward, to see what needs attention, to drop your armor and reach for truth. But this demands maturity. It demands the courage to be wrong, to see the other not as an adversary, but as a collaborator in your evolution. You cannot hold love and ego in the same hand. One will always slip through your fingers. So many people walk away from relationships because the ego says, you deserve better. But what the ego really means is, you deserve to avoid discomfort. And so we choose comfort over confrontation, distance over depth, safety over truth. But there is no real safety in a life devoid of intimacy. You were not born to remain guarded. You were born to be broken open, again and again, by love. Not because love is cruel, but because it is the only thing strong enough to tear down the fortress of ego and show you your true self. And your true self is not hard, prideful, or afraid. Your true self is soft, open, radiant, capable of holding immense pain and immense joy without losing its center. You cannot reach this self through ego, only through surrender. So how do we begin? We begin by practicing humility, by realizing that our perspective is never the whole truth, that our partner, our friend, our family member is not the villain the ego makes them out to be, but another soul, also struggling to be seen, heard, and loved. We begin by listening, truly listening, not waiting to respond, not planning our defense, but listening with the heart, listening for what's underneath the words, for the fear, the longing, the unmet needs. We begin by apologizing, not to appease but to repair, to say, I value this connection more than I value you being right. We begin by taking responsibility, by owning our part, by asking, what am I bringing to this dynamic? What unhealed wound am I projecting? What expectation am I clinging to? And we begin by loving ourselves, because the more we heal our own inner world, the less we need others to validate it. And in that space, real love is born. Not love that clings, controls, or demands, but love that flows. The ego destroys relationships because it confuses love with power. But love is not about power, it is about presence. So I ask you, where is your ego sabotaging your relationships? Where are you holding onto pride when your heart longs for peace? Where are you blaming others when life is asking you to look within? The walls we build to protect our hearts often become the prisons that keep us alone. But you hold the key. The moment you choose humility over pride, empathy over ego, truth over illusion, you begin to dismantle the prison. And you create a space where love can return. Not a perfect love, but a real one. And that is all any of us truly want. To be real, to be seen, to be loved. Let go of the ego, and you will find everything you've been searching for. There is a quiet war raging within you, not the war between good and evil, not even the war between right and wrong. It is far more subtle and far more devastating. It is the war between who you think you are and who you truly are, between the voice that says protect yourself and the whisper that longs to say set yourself free. This is the ego's war, and the only way to end it is to lay down your arms, not in defeat but in transcendence. You see, the ego does not want freedom. It wants familiarity. It clings to control, to identity, to illusion. It tells you that you are the sum of your achievements, your failures, your titles, your traumas, your beliefs. It gives you a name, a role, a story, and then convinces you that you are that story. But let me ask you, who are you when the story ends? Who are you when no one is watching, when the applause stops, when your accomplishments fade, when your possessions are stripped away? This is the great terror of the ego, to realize that it was never real to begin with, that everything it built, everything it fought for, everything it protected was a mask, and that is why ego death is the most terrifying, yet the most liberating experience a human being can endure. Ego death is not annihilation. It is not suicide of the self. It is the peeling away of everything that is false until only the truth remains. It is not the end of you. It is the beginning of the real you. Most people go their entire lives without ever truly meeting themselves. They walk the earth with masks on their faces, armor on their hearts, and scripts in their hands. They play roles they did not write, in a play they do not understand, trying to earn applause from an audience that does not matter. But deep inside, the soul rebels. It cries out. It whispers, "This isn't me. There's something more." That whisper is the invitation, the call to the hero's journey, the beginning of awakening, and yet, when the ego hears that whisper, it panics. It fears the loss of identity. It clings tighter. It grows louder. No. It says, "You are your trauma. You are your status. You are your beliefs. Don't let them go. If you let go, you'll disappear." But the truth is, only the false disappears. What is real cannot be destroyed. The path to ego death is not easy. It is a dismantling, a shedding, a fire. It is the moment you realize that your opinions are not facts, that your pain is not your personality, that your past is not your prison, that you do not have to be who you were yesterday. It is the moment you stop asking, "Who am I supposed to be?" and begin asking, "Who am I really?" This journey requires brutal honesty. It demands that you look at your shadows and say, "Yes, you are part of me too." It asks you to sit with your discomfort, not to escape it. It forces you to unlearn everything that kept you small. The ego cannot stand this process. It screams, it fights, it bargains. It will sabotage your relationships, your peace, even your success, just to remain in control. But if you are courageous enough to continue, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see through the illusion. You begin to laugh at your old fears. You begin to notice how often you were driven by insecurity, by the need to prove, to perform, to be praised. You begin to realize that your worth was never tied to any of it, and in that moment, perhaps for the first time, you are free. Freedom is not found in external circumstances, not in more money, more recognition, more control. That is the ego's definition of freedom, and it always comes with invisible chains. True freedom is internal. It is the capacity to sit in the stillness of your own being and say, "I am enough." It is the ability to walk through the world unattached to outcomes, because you are no longer trying to prove your value. It is the radical permission to be yourself, without apology and without performance. And that freedom cannot coexist with ego, because ego is built on fear, and freedom is born of love. The moment you let go of ego, your perception shifts. You no longer see people as threats or competitors. You see them as fellow travelers. You no longer act from compulsion or reaction. You act from alignment. You no longer chase love. You become it. Imagine living that way. Imagine waking up without the weight of needing to prove yourself. Imagine walking into a room and not wondering what people think of you. Imagine facing failure without shame, success without arrogance, and criticism without collapse. This is not a fantasy. It is a reality available to anyone willing to die to their ego. But how do we do it? We begin by noticing. Every time you feel defensive, ask, "What am I protecting?" Every time you need validation, ask, "What am I afraid is untrue about me?" Every time you judge another, ask, "What part of me have I not yet loved?" These small moments of awareness are cracks in the ego's armor. Light begins to pour in, and little by little, the false self loses its grip. Next, we surrender, not in weakness, but in wisdom. We surrender the need to control how we are perceived. We surrender the need to be perfect. We surrender the idea that we are separate from life, from others, from the divine. And finally, we serve, not from egoic superiority, but from soulful alignment. When the ego dies, what rises is not passivity, it is purpose. You begin to live from essence, not from performance. Your actions flow from inner truth, not external approval. Your life becomes not about me, but about we, and that is the final liberation. When you are no longer obsessed with your own image, you are free to love others more fully. When you are no longer attached to your identity, you are free to evolve. When you are no longer driven by fear, you are free to create. This is the gift of ego death. It is the door to your highest self, the portal to your purpose, the end of illusion, and the beginning of reality. So I ask you now, not as a lecture, but as a sacred invitation, what are you ready to let die? The need to be right, the persona you've built, the bitterness you've carried, the story you've told for years to justify your pain, let it go, not because it's wrong, but because it's over, and what awaits you beyond the death of ego is everything you've ever truly wanted, not more, not louder, not bigger, but real, alive, whole, and finally free.